ICQ Podcast episode 239, Yaesu FT-450D review. Well, hello fellow Amateur Ham Radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, the 239th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported by Grant Porter, Kilo Golf 4 Sierra Delta Romeo, John Boyer, Kilo Foxtrot 5 Foxtrot Echo India, Peter Caffrey, Chris Hayes, 2E0 X-Ray Charlie Hotel, an anonymous donor from the UK, and John Baggett, Kilo 2 Bravo Alpha Golf, and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB W9ICQ is joined by Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, and Martin Rothwell, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, to discuss the latest Amateur Ham Radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a review of the Yaesu FT-450D. Well, you probably noticed at the start of the show we had a wealth of donors this episode who kindly responded to our mail to help us pay our running costs. We'd run a little bit low on funds, so we'd like to thank the following listeners. Grant Porter, Kilo Golf 4 Sierra Delta Romeo, says, thanks, keep up the great show, glad you added Dan to the panel a while back, 73 from Grant. John Boyer, as I mentioned, Kilo Foxtrot 5 Foxtrot Echo India. Chris Hayes, 2E0 X-Ray Charlie Hotel, says, keep up the pork pie dunking, Leslie. So, great, Chris, that I say you enjoy Leslie's contribution to the show. Peter Caffrey, anonymous donor from the UK, and John Baggett, Kilo 2 Bravo Alpha Golf, says, thanks for all you do, and 73 from John. So, guys, we really appreciate you helping us out there. We had to do a bit of a donation drive. Thank you all for responding. As I say, that will help us pay our way for the next couple of months or so, the donations we received there. Along with those guys also were the monthly and annual subscription donors. Don't hold back, guys. These donations help keep the podcast show advert free. So please visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send their way is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Dan, Chris and Martin as they discuss the latest Amateur Ham Radio review, including a strategic review of the UHF Spectrum and how ham radio saved a Guns N' Roses gig. Hope you enjoy.
Right, hi guys, and welcome to episode 239 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Good evening, guys.
Hi Dan, good to have you on board. I have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, hi guys, nice to be here again.
Yeah, good to hear Chris. Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, mine. And I'm going to use my call sign because Colin ribbed me on this one the other week, so I don't use it that often. So I'm Martin, M1MRB or W9ICQ. Before we start the podcast news, our thoughts and condolences go out to the people that suffered in the atrocities at London Bridge earlier on Saturday. This is an area that Chris, Martin and I know quite well, because we visit HMS Belfast, which ties up less than about a couple of 100 metres from this area. So, not a nice thing to happen. It was homegrown as far as we know, so bit of a shame really that it had to happen. There seems no sense in it to me. But our thoughts and condolences go out to the people that lost family, and to the people who got injured, and may you recover pretty quickly.
And just also an extra on there, obviously, our thoughts do go out to those people, but also a big pat on the back for the emergency services and the emergency responders that did jump in so quickly and get the situation under control and care for the people that were injured.
Yeah, they pretty much had it shut down within about 8 minutes, wasn't it, or something? So,
about that, yeah.
All right, starting the podcast. Our first news story says, before Twitter and Facebook, there was Morse code, and it talks about potentially Morse code being the first social media. And I suppose any way of shrinking the globe by passing information quicker does effectively shrink our globe. So, Dan, you're the Morse code man. What do you think?
Oh, I think that's a great story, and of course, it's true. Even back when there was just landline telegraphy, you heard of budding romances and all that kind of stuff over the wire, as they used to say.
Yeah. And you were saying before we started, it was obviously at least half the characters were different on the original telegraph Morse to today's current international Morse.
Oh, right. So that's an interesting thing. I've actually tried to learn a little bit of American Morse, and it's tough. So, for example, in just as an example, the letter R in International Morse code is da-da-dit, right?
Yeah.
Well, in landline Morse, or American Morse, they sometimes call it, it's dit, and there's actually a space within the character.
Mm.
So that makes it even that much trickier.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's doubly more difficult for you, Dan, because you actually do Morse. If somebody was learning it from scratch, it would probably just become natural. But trying to learn something different, I suppose it makes it more difficult.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. I think all Morse. The problem with Morse, learning Morse code, whether it's international or American, is there's a steep learning curve, and I just haven't been able to put in enough practice to get up that learning curve for American Morse.
Yeah. Well, it's a much American Morse transmitted these days, Dan.
Well, not on the air, but there actually is I guess it's an international organization, but it's mostly here in North America. There's actually a group called what do they call themselves? I don't know, but it's dedicated to American Morse, and it's made up of some ham radio operators, but some folks that still are around from the railroad telegraphy days, and they actually have an internet wire. So you can sign into this server and send internet or American Morse back and forth with other people.
All right, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. There was a website that I was doing that a while ago actually. I think it's something like morsecode.me, and myself and Matt Nassau that's on the podcast occasionally. We were playing with it a while ago. In fact, Matthew went away and actually built an interface to go between his mouse, because the idea of the website was you use your mouse to send, your mouse button to send the Morse, and he actually made a little interface to connect a Morse key into his mouse, so you could actually send Morse from a Morse key. And actually, I did a similar thing afterwards, and it actually went pretty well. So you could, and the idea of this website, you could send. This was just regular Morse, not the telegraphy or the version you're talking about, Dan.
Right.
Right. We would actually decode it as well. It was a little bit clunky. It didn't always get it right, but you could sort of send each other messages and things, and it's quite fun actually. There were different sort of chat rooms for different speeds of Morse, and most people on there were just sitting there going, not knowing what they were doing, and do just random characters coming out. But I actually got quite good at it in the end. I could send Morse quite well, and you could stop people getting quite frustrated trying to send something back to you. So yeah, it's quite fun. And each different person on there had a different tone of code, so you could sort of tell who it was that was sending it at each time.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were kind of using Morse in a modern environment.
Yeah, Morse over the internet.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Probably not using the full of my 50 megabits per second bandwidth, but but there you go. It's still fun.
The name of the club, by the way, is the Morse Telegraph Club, and their website is morsetelegraphclub.org.
Right. Brian, you were about to say.
Sorry, I was going to say the cheeky side of me was going to say American Morse. How can you do Morse code with an accident? Sorry, not an accident, an accent. Sorry, but thinking about the other things, but looking through this article nowadays, of course, on Twitter and things like that, we have abbreviations: ROFL, LOL, BRB, that sort of thing. Just effectively fit things into 140 characters. I didn't realise there were lots of things like this in the early days of Morse as well, like GM for good morning, SFD, stop for dinner. But of course, thinking about it, Q codes, we have those, QRZ, QSK, things like that. So I guess it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? So ham radio really is, and Morse code really is the original social media.
Yeah,
really, it's funny actually. You mentioned before before we hit the play and record button on the news section here about the Titanic when that sank, and there was actually some transcripts of the Morse messages that went out from Titanic back in 1912 when it sank. And it's quite interesting actually that the language that's used there is very similar to the language that we use today on amateur radio. Things like old man and the sort of things that we hear now. We've been around for a very long time.
Well, there you go. I mean, 73, 88 when I'm talking to the wife. Those sort of things. And
those things are actually part of something called the Phillips code. And they were sort of canned messages that people would send over the telegraph, like happy birthday. There's a code for happy birthday and congratulations. And the only two that have sort of survived in amateur radio anyway are 73 and 88.
Yeah.
But there are numbers for all these other things as well.
So a little bit like file compression, but a very early version.
Exactly.
Shorthand.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, as I say, I think they got the newspaper, the Washington Post here, mentions in Morse code being the early social media. But I think every development in our hobby moving forward, has gradually shrunk the globe. I mean, you think Morse on the wire, telegraph wires, then you go Morse on the air with radio, you're travelling much greater distances and being more mobile. Then when they went to AM voice, that must have been absolutely, absolutely almost amazing for most people in the early days of radio. Then to FM, single sideband, as Dan was telling me, first was experimented with in World War II, and I think amateurs started to adopt it around the 1960s. But every one of these technologies, as they come, have been a way of moving data and moving information and bringing people closer together. So, I think amateur radio as a whole has been a social media event, and we in amateur radio use Facebook and Twitter as well.
Oh yeah, I'm big on Twitter actually.
Yeah.
I've got the mediums there, isn't it? I suppose amateur radio's been around a long time. We all use it, but of course there's lots of we talked actually again before we get playing record on the recording here, but we've had things like Yahoo groups that we all probably still use. There's Usenet groups. I think Dan, you were mentioning, was it UniUNet?
Right.
And internet relay chat and all kinds of different ways of communicating either via computers or using the radio. And of course, going back even further, you had the telegraph, which was a piece of wire, and a Morse key on each end. So we try to use them all, don't we?
Yeah. I think the funny one is if you went back, say, 30, 40 years ago, before mobile phones, people had pagers, and you got sent a text message, and then they went away from pagers and to phones, and now people send text messages.
You say 30 or 40 years ago, Martin. I had a pager back in 96, 97.
Yeah, I was that sort of time at work. Yeah, I was called out many times. That noise of that page used to.
I've still got mine somewhere. I think it's on the network that still exists, but I don't think it'll work anymore. I think you'd have to call on and get it reactivated. I think I've still got it somewhere.
Yeah,
my parents' loft.
I had one back in the 80s when I was on call. And then certainly in the 90s, I had engineers on the road that used pagers. We used to send them their work via a pager. So
I think our printer engineers actually used to still get their jobs on pagers up until about 2009, 2010, when smartphones became a bit more realistic.
Yeah. So interesting how technology's moved on, and sometimes it goes full cycle. But as I say, nice to see Morse in there, being put up against Facebook and Twitter. I think it's just nice that the whole thing of social media and moving data is reflected throughout the world, but a lot of what we've done in the past has got them there. Moving on, strategic review of the UHF spectrum in the UK from 410 megs to 470 megs. Now, in the UK, our 77 band is from 430 to 440 megahertz, the 10 meg section there. But before coming on here, I know Martin has a UK Simple Light license, commercial license for some of the things you do, Martin. And at UHF, you've only got 3 frequencies. So I kind of see why they've got to do something to allocate this spectrum a little bit better, because it's pretty much impossible in London, isn't it?
Pretty much. I mean, UHF we know is prime real estate because of obviously the wavelength, the way that it does penetrate through buildings a lot better. I'm sure there are lots of frequencies that could be freed up that are not in use or that are allocated to other things that are very, very seldom used. And so the idea of having a bit of a clean-up there does make a lot of sense. The document did talk about aligning things with Europe, but that could obviously impact a lot of users and, of course, potentially create a lot of work for the dealers in potentially reprogramming things if that had to happen. Yeah, we have 3 frequencies at UHF for the simple license. And, of course, 3 frequencies, around 449 megs. It can be a pain in the backside, certainly in a highly populated area, because even when you go through all of the different things, all the different CTCSS tones, all of the different DCS tones, invariably you're going to find someone else operating on the same frequency as you. I've got radios, they have 16 channels on them. They're all programmed up on 3 frequencies that repeat throughout the 16, and then they've all got random DTCSS and DCS codes. Trying to use them anywhere in London, you can pretty much forget it because you will hear someone on there, someone not be interfering. So in London, you've got to go for VHF, that sort of thing. So any possibility of getting more in there, I think that's probably a good thing. Although you do wonder what might happen going forward with regards to the 77s band. It is obviously prime real estate. Would some of that be snatched back from us? Although I'm led to believe that they like to keep us as a secondary user, sort of in case the military perhaps need to use these frequencies, or major events like the Olympics that we had here. They snatched some of those frequencies back for a while they needed them, and then obviously when they're not being used, they can pass them back, and we can occupy them when they're not in use. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to comment on that. So yeah, we know that during the Olympics, that yes, they did use some of the spectrum that we have in that part of the bands, and yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess that UHF is the absolute prime real estate, like your term you use there. Certainly for portable radios that are obviously very, very popular and have a lot of use. And something like London, where we've got huge numbers of people, that's comes at a real premium. So I'm not surprised they're doing a review. I guess it's probably quite a lot of money tied up in that spectrum, and whether that's a motivation, I don't know. But certainly, I don't know how much of it we really use. We also have repeaters. I know we had to change the repeater allocations during the Olympics. On our local repeaters, they had to change frequencies. But I guess how much of it do we actually use? I mean, 77 is probably actually used quite a bit. We have quite a lot of repeaters, certainly in the UK, on that band. So it probably actually is used a fair bit. Is there any spare spectrum there? Don't know. I don't know whether Ofcom actually do monitor and see how much spectrum's actually used. Because I mean, is it a use it or lose it situation? Are they going to say, well, actually, this bit of spectrum here really isn't used that much, and therefore we're going to take it away? Do we have to make the effort to actually use our rights to make sure we keep them?
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, there was only 3 UHF frequencies for simple light. Simple sight, I think, is about 4 or 5 other frequencies. And when I was in the commercial radio business, working for a commercial radio dealer a couple of years ago, to get a repeater license on UHF in London was like rocking horse manure. You just couldn't get one. The whole of London is just clogged on UHF, so they need to try and sort something out there. Dan, I know this is predominantly a UK story. Do you have any interest on this one?
Well, I would think that you'd want to evaluate the spectrum usage from time to time, and I guess it's kind of one of those things. Be careful what you wish for, right? I mean, if they target amateur radio frequencies, that might not be such a good thing.
Yeah, but you've got from 410 to 470. So what's that? It's 60 megs, and we only to have 10 of it. So,
and it's a lot of space we have a lot of space, and to be fair, we don't use a lot of it. Yeah. I know that people say use it or lose it, but you tune around 77s, the 77 spectrum here. Yeah, okay, you have a few repeaters there, you have a few digital beacons and things like that going on, and of course there's the satellites that fly over there with a 77s downlink. But in the grand scheme of things, when you actually tune through the 77s band, there's not much there. Lots of people aren't using it that could be.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to take it back, I can see that happening.
Yeah, but interestingly, if the three of us are having a natter and we go simplex, we nearly always go UHF rather than VHF.
Yeah. In fact, we went UHF the other day on Fusion, didn't we? On the way home?
We did.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think UHF does get used a fair amount, certainly around the London area, and we say there are a lot of repeaters there at both ends of the band, and by having them 7.5 megs or 7.6 or 9 meg splits, if you took some of the band away, that would mean reconfiguring a lot of repeaters. So I think they'll leave the amateur stuff alone at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, reconfiguring the repeaters, of course, it's easy enough for a dealer to plug a programming cable into a repeater or into a radio and then just upload a new programming file into the handheld. But, of course, if you're having to reprogram repeaters, okay, the antennas are probably quite wideband, but think about any duplexes that they might be using, any cavities that they might be using.
Yeah.
They're going to have to turn up and change all those as well. So you would hope that they're not going to end up moving the frequencies too far along or moving too many people around if that needs to happen. I know there's some broadcast uplinks in there as well, which is interesting. So, but there's a lot of people's response on the web, on Ofcom's website as well. You can actually go to the website and see people's responses. So it'd be interesting to see where Ofcom go with it and what they decide to do with it.
Yeah, well, let's hope they sort it out. To say they're looking to standardise for another 10 years, sort it out for another 10 years of operation, so that'll be good. Moving on, ham radio saves Guns N' Roses gig. Now, this is a story that happened a long time ago, but we noticed that the gentleman, unfortunately, now has a silent key and is up for sale. But there was a Guns N' Roses gig, and Guns N' Roses came back and played there recently, but yeah, they suddenly found themselves couldn't get the sound system to work, and what they do, they get the local farmer, who's it says here a two-way radio enthusiast, which would have been an amateur experimenter in Ireland, to come along and fix it. So yeah, Chris, what do you think?
Well, I think it just shows that we have amateur radio people have lots of skills that we can use to benefit the community. So, in this case, there was a problem at a big event and someone stepped up, had the skills that they probably learned through a hobby that they may not have learned otherwise, and were able to save the day. So, all good.
Yeah. Martin, I take it you're not a Guns N' Roses fan?
I wouldn't say so. No, I mean, don't get me wrong; they're okay, but they're not particularly my favourite kind of music. It has to be said, but it does prove that we're not all geeks and nerds, and whatever you're doing when you work in technology, any kind of technology that involves either an antenna or a plug on it, generally, and if you talk to an amateur radio operator about it, they'll probably be quite happy to look at it. And if it's something like this that can help him out, then great. I'd like to say is I hope that they let him stay and watch the concert for free if that's what he wanted to do, if he fixed it for them.
Yeah. Well, I guess if most amateurs are probably like me and running around with the odd tools in the boot of your car and a multimeter, so...
I do that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I do that too.
Yeah. The comment is, of course he's got a soldering iron in the boot of his car. I can't believe that. Yes, he has.
Yeah. So there you go. Dan, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to say, I guess saving the day, using the term saving the day is sort of in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. He shoots, he scores. Oh, yeah. I take it you're not a fan then, Dan?
You know what? I've never been a big rock music guy, and I can't even, off the top of my head, think of one single Guns N' Roses song. So
No. I mean, don't get me wrong. The world would be a boring place if we all liked the same thing. And,
absolutely.
So, no kickback there, Dan, because so I'm not a big Guns N' Roses fan, but it's just a nice story that it happened all those years ago. Unfortunately, Noel EI4HXB, we believe to be now a silent key, and his farm's up for sale, and the house, he says, needs some renovation, but it's a nice big house on a 50-acre site in Ireland, so potentially I would suggest a good antenna site. You were saying there's a big transmitter fairly close by, weren't you?
Yeah, well, it's near Summerhill, which is sort of Dublin, I believe, which is where probably one of the biggest, most powerful transmitters for Europe sits. It's 500 kilowatts and operates on 252 kilohertz. So it's the long-wave transmitter, originally occupied at the time, would have been occupied by Atlantic 252. Now I believe it's used by RTE.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, it's 500 kilowatts. It's that's pretty powerful by our standards.
Yeah.
And still on the air?
I believe. I think the transmitter's been changed. I think it's a different transmitter that's connected to it, but it is still transmitting RT Radio 1, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just looking now on the website. So AM RT Radio 1, 252 kilohertz.
Yep.
Yeah, RTE did threaten to shut that station down a couple of years ago, and they got
That'd be
so
really
much.
sad to see 252 go. I mean, I'd like to see Atlantic come back onto that frequency, but it's never going to happen.
No.
They've long gone.
But there was lots of kickback because a lot of Irish people who live outside of Ireland were able to receive it, and there was a lot of complaints, and they kept it on the air.
Yeah, when they put it up, there was a lot of complaints about them putting it up, and I think it was Radio Tara, that's the parent company of Atlantic 252, had to go knock on people's doors and put filters on their phones and all sorts of other stuff because the 500 kilowatts was getting into their phones, their TVs, and everything else.
Yeah.
It's not just the amateurs that can potentially upset people's tellies.
It's funny you say that, as I was actually at, there's a similar transmitter at Pulmoor in near Huddersfield, and that runs a similar amount of power. And I was there, and I just happened to drive literally as about 100 metres away. And I thought, I wonder, I'll just put my radio on this. And nothing, no interference whatsoever. So they obviously got some really good filtering on their output.
Intro, you talk about filtering. This is going off at a side tangent. I got to know an old boy about 15 months before he became a silent key. And I got to know him quite nicely, and we had lots of chats. And he's a very clever gentleman. And I'm not going to give his call sign out because I think it's unfair now. He can't defend himself. But when he died, I went to the funeral, and I took two old ladies that lived next door to him to the funeral as transport, And when we came back, they said, "Oh, come in for a cup of tea." So we went in for a cup of tea, the wife and I, and we were sitting there, and the lady said, "Would you like to remove all the stuff he left in our house?" And I went, "What?" And they started showing me there's filters everywhere, all over the place. They have filters plugged into telephones, televisions, all over the place. And it was quite interesting because this guy used to be the man from the GPO that went round investigating interference problems. So anyway, it was just a side story, but we ended up taking all these filters off these poor ladies' stuff for her. But there you go. But yeah, it was good to see that, that was an interesting one from the boys there. Fire department installs a shortwave antenna. Well, it looks like Gun Barrel City Fire Department there in Cheddar Creek Amateur Radio Club has teamed up to put this up for them. And it looks like they had some form of emergency communications, probably VHF or UHF, that they had a range of about 15 miles. But it looks like they've gone shortwave to get far more distance. And I'm guessing, because there's not enough meat in the story here, but I'm guessing they're probably on low frequencies and running MVIS. And Dan, you were saying a lot of traffic nets do that as well.
Well, yeah, and here in Michigan we do that, and it's also sort of a part of the whole statewide emergency communication scheme. And down in Texas, that's a big state. I mean, it's a big state, so the ability to be able to communicate over longer distances, say to Austin, Texas, which is the state capital, would be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I would guess NVIS would work quite well because it would get in. I don't know the geography there, but if you've got valleys and that, it would get into cover sort of 500-600 miles quite well. So, yeah, I think it's probably the best sort of way. And your country does tend to end up with a fair number of tornadoes and that sort of thing happening.
Well, especially down there in Texas, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say anything like that is an advantage. Martin, what do you think?
Well, when all else fails, amateur radio. I always say you should never, ever, ever rely on repeater or infrastructure-based communications. If you're reliant on the national grid or your national power grid, if you're reliant on a telecoms company or anything being able to operate, then there is always something there that can go wrong. It may not be intentionally, it may be something that's been sabotaged, it may be something that's physically gone wrong, but amateur radio, you can run it off a battery and you can get on the air, and there's nothing really that can prevent that signal getting out, barring a bit of atmospherics. And if you know what you're doing, then you're laughing, really, aren't they? Really, I'm hoping this is going to set a precedent for more to follow suit, in particular in areas that are prone to bad weather situations.
Yeah.
And what I like is the fact that this is a combination of the City Fire Department, this is the Gun Barrel City Fire Department, and the local amateur radio club, the Cedar Creek Amateur Radio Club, working together to do this. So it wasn't, they've actually got people to help them, which is great. They've got the amateur community to help them, and they put this together. And it's there as a backup, so if there are storms or other issues, then they've got something to fall back on. So, I think it's a really good one.
Yeah. So, this is another example of amateur radio helping the community. And I think it's certainly worth the community talking to us, because we do have expertise and can give advice, and we aren't going to charge you an absolute fortune like a commercial company.
If we had the fire brigade turn up and say we want some help putting something together, we jump at the chance. I think we'd be there straight away.
I think the club would do it. Like, I'll bring my tools.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Like, where can I drill the hole? No, we need to talk about it. I'm already drilling. It's plugged in. Don't worry.
You getting at me again? You getting at me again?
Not at all.
Yeah, just because I got a man's drill. Oh dear. Okay, well, I'm going to close it at that one. A 10-year-old ham radio operator in swaddling coat. Now, I'm not even sure quite where in the UK that is. I think it's in the Midlands near Burton, because it's I think it was done at the Burton Amateur Radio Club in the UK. But it's nice to see a 10-year-old in the UK getting his licence. His dad, Robert G7LAS, he's been involved with his son. And Robert, I hope you enjoy having your son in the hobby as much as I do convincing Colin to join the hobby. So, Chris, you go first on this one.
Well, I think it's good that we've got a young lad involved, and he's doing something with his dad. He's no doubt. I don't think he's gone out on his own doing this, I would imagine, but he may be. I'd imagine he's got a dad and his son working together and enjoying a hobby, which I think is great.
Yeah. Well, I know some other people who are father and sons who've done it, and it does quite sort of bond them. I can think of quite a few that have gone through our course where either the son's done it because the father's an amateur, or both father and son have done it at the same time. So, I think it does, get families talking together, and if you have a common interest, it's quite good. So, yeah. Mine.
Well, it's Swaddling Coat is it's in Derbyshire, close to the borders of Leicestershire and Shropshire. It's near Burton upon Trent. It's anything that gets younger people into the hobby. Obviously, they are the future of this hobby. If you think about it, is a good thing when you get the bug. This guy clearly has. Then obviously you get it. So hats off to him.
Yeah,
keep it going.
Yeah. So Dan, we have one. I know you guys tend to have quite a few youngsters in the hobby over there on your side of the pond, but we got one as well now.
Well, that's excellent. I really like the father-son angle here. I often get fathers and sons in my classes, and in fact, the last class, these folks are a little older, but I had a 40-year-old. I'm guessing their age. A 40-year-old and a 70-year-old who. The guy came with his father, and they both got their licenses, and that's a nice thing.
Yeah. Well, as I say, when we originally started the ICQ podcast, and Colin was more active with the live recordings, apart from what he does now, although he's still active, he was very adamant, well, is it a father and son thing, or do I call you Martin, not Dad? And I went, no, because a lot of amateurs would be quite pleased to have their son working, and I'd seen this in the past. So, yeah, it's nice. I would never force any of my offspring to do it, or my wife. She could probably pass the foundation. She's been around me so long, she could probably pass the foundation without doing the course sort of thing. But I'd never force somebody to do it. But it is nice to have family involved. So there you go. Last news story. Buildout of National First Responders Broadband Network could drive areas changes. Dan, you put this forward. Do you want to champion this one?
Yeah, sure. So, I've often been a proponent of having somebody, presumably the ARRL, really get more involved with advanced emergency communications of some kind. I mean, I think we need to be sort of more forward thinking. And this story here really points to the need for that. That one of the quotes from this guy, who's head of the National Public Safety Telecommunications Council, says, "The endurance of amateur radio systems in disasters has been a big selling point in the past for incorporating amateur operators in emergency plans, but perhaps not so much in the future." So, I mean, I think we should take this as a real warning that powers that be are going to start moving away from amateur radio.
That's worrying to me, but that is worrying, isn't it? Because, as Martin said earlier, the thing we tend to cover for is we're fairly mobile, flexible unit, amateur radio. If you've got a mammoth dinosaur that's trying to put this together, you're reliant on somebody planning and somebody not having this drop on the day when it's going to happen, don't you?
Right.
Yeah. So, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one because, it's almost like they're trying to replace what amateurs can do today with something which is going to rely on some other service. Okay, they're talking about making it more resilient, but simple works, and we can do something really simple, which is really effective. Doesn't require a lot of investment. We string up a wire, we have an aerial. We have some feeder, we have a battery, we have a radio, and it just works. So I don't really understand what the need for it is for, really. I don't really see what's broken that needs fixing. I don't know what you guys think.
No, I agree with you. Martin, what do you think?
Well, it's they can move away from amateur radio as much as they like, but believe you me, when their networks go down, they'll be the first people knocking at the door again, I'm sure. Don't throw all the babies out with the bathwater. No. We were looking for changes and new technology and embracing new technology, great. But let's just remember, when everything else fails, again, I go back to my original comment, amateur radio.
Yeah, and sometimes it's better to use the KISS theory, isn't it? Yeah, keep it simple, because, all right, there's lots of nice new technologies, including stuff in amateur radio. Mm-hmm. But as I was saying earlier, before we recorded this, if you go digital modes, that's great. There's three and plus digital modes out there, and somebody's going to tell me there's a lot more than, I think there's about 5, but the main 3 are D-Star, Fusion, and DMR. But if you limit yourself to one of those, then you're going to limit the number of people who can help you. If you limit yourself to a specific thing, you limit the number of people who help you. If you drop back to analog, then you've effectively got VHF, UHF, or HF. And, with those 3 options and analog, most rigs and most amateurs could put together a network fairly quickly. Certainly passing voice traffic anyway, or CW. So, great coming up with new ideas and putting these sort of things in place. But there's a cost involved to this as well. There's a cost involved to this, and I'm sure that the Aries members don't charge for their time. So I think it's an interesting one. You want the final word on this one, Dan?
All I'm saying is watch what these people are saying, because that's the way they're going. And, we've known this for years, too. I mean, this isn't the first time someone said something like this. So, I just think we should be more on top of it than we are.
Yeah, and maybe prod the ARRL for their assistance in keeping you abreast of this and keeping on top of it, I would suggest.
Yep.
Yeah. So there we go. That's our last news story. Now for a quick run round the news table with the guys to find out what you've been up to. Dan, do you want to go first?
Well, sure. Since I was last on the podcast, I went to Dayton and had a great time there. The new venue was quite interesting. I managed to avoid most of the mud in the Mud Bowl flea market, but a lot of folks that were out there got quite muddy. That was sort of the big story of this year's Dayton. It looks like the attendance was good. Maybe not quite as much as they hoped, but they got over 25,000 people there. They were hoping for between 30 and 35,000. And I walked away with a new SDR radio, which I still haven't gotten quite all hooked up yet, but I'm looking forward to doing that.
Right. So you're going to tell us which one it is, or we'll keep it a secret for another episode?
No. So it's made by a small company called a Hobby PCB. And I've already built their Hard Rock 50-watt amplifier.
Right.
And they've just come out with this SDR radio. It's called the RS-HFIQ. And it's a 5-watt output, but it'll hook up real nicely to this amp. And when I get it all together, I'll have a 50-watt SDR transceiver.
Sounds good to me. You'll have to keep us informed on that one, Dan. And,
I certainly will.
And I certainly saw your video from Dayton, where you did your talk on. So I saw your video from Dayton on the one-day tech class, and I enjoyed that, Dan. So that was a good one.
Thank you.
So
I should mention too that the forums at Dayton were really great. The rooms were much better than the rooms at Hera, and I had a fairly good turnout, even though I was like the first forum of the day on Friday, and a lot of people. There were some traffic problems Friday morning, and a lot of people didn't actually get to Dayton, the fairgrounds there, by 9 o'clock. So I lost a few attendees there, but they all emailed me, and now that it's on YouTube, they can just watch it. So yeah, all that went well. Everything else, went well. The food was good. The aside from it, and only if they didn't have so much rain, they had like 4 inches of rain. From Thursday through Saturday, and that's what turned that area into a real mud bath. But aside from that area, I think everything went off pretty well, and they've got plans to improve it for next year. So I think the new venue's looking pretty good.
Sounds good to me, Dan. Sounds good to me. And you mentioned to me via email, and I mentioned it on the last podcast, but I'll say it again because you're here. You had a number of people come up to you and congratulate you on what you're doing with us on the podcast. So that was
yeah. So they all said they enjoyed it, and I didn't hear a bad word. Of course, maybe the people that were going to say a bad word weren't going to mention it to me. But yeah. So that was quite nice too to hear some good comments about the ICQ podcast.
Well, especially as I say, when they come up to you and tell you how good you were doing, which is good, and we appreciate that. So. Thanks for that, guys. I'm going to mine first because Chris is probably going to tell you what I was up to the other day. Round to mine.
Well, I can't remember if I mentioned it on the last episode or not. Excuse me. But I added an earth rod to my HF antenna. Put a 4-foot rod in the ground, attached that up, and that I tell you what, that has made, even on an off-center fed dipole, that has made one heck of a difference, both in the noise floor. It seems to have gone down a bit, but even just playing with Whisper, I think, as Ed was mentioning a couple of episodes ago, it's made a huge difference, and loads more stations are hearing me, and I'm hearing a load more, so that's definitely a good thing. Been playing with Fusion and D-Star, had a few comments about Fusion. Some people are a bit confused about how it's working and stuff, so doing tests with people online just while they're playing with XP. And learning how to use it. And say, as we're going, I'm still learning how to use it as well. And also looking at my 4-meter halo. I mentioned this to you, Martin, and I will put this out to the podcast audience. Maybe they can point me in the right direction. connecting the 4-meter halo up. Now, normally the radio connects from the radio into the SWR meter, and then from the SWR meter out to the antenna. And when I measure the SWR on the normal antenna, put the meter into full scale, get it calibrate, needle goes over to the end, switch it back, it gives you an SWR reading. When you plug the halo in, it acts as if the SWR meter has no power in it at all, like I've just unplugged it. Now, obviously, I have double-checked all the connections. It's all there. Unplug that antenna from the same thing, plug the vertical back in, and it's all working again. Plug the halo back in, and it's just like it's completely disconnected. I cannot get my head around it. There is a beehive capacitor, I think they call them, in the halo itself. Maybe it's something to do that, I don't know. But if any of the listeners have any ideas, they can point me in the right direction. I say, please do drop me a message at Big Cheese Radio on Twitter. I'd love to get some input on that, please.
Okay, Martin. Well, if I'm not promising 100%, but if I get some time Saturday, I'll try and pop round if
Okay.
you're in, that is.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, see what we can do. But as I say, I know this weekend's going to be a very busy radio weekend. We're more on that in a while, but I'll see what I can do on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely no hurry, but it's one of those things I've asked a number of people, and they've all given me that look of completely scratching their heads like, I have no idea. So hence I thought I'd ask our audience.
Right. Well, we'll have a think about it and have a look. Chris, what have you been up to?
What have I been up to? Well, as you know, Martin, you and I have been out playing with your new radio, so I won't steal all your thunder on that one, but we did work a few stations on your new radio. In fact, your new radio did a bit better than mine. I was trying 2 meters and you were on 6 meters, and have to say it, at the moment, 6 meters and 10 meters seem to be pretty active. Lots of great conditions on those bands. So that was on Saturday, wasn't it, Martin? And on Sunday, I, at home, tried a few contacts on 10 meters, and I did actually manage to work Italy and Austria on 10. So my first ever 10-meter contacts were into Italy and into Austria. So that was quite good. So I think the conditions on those bands at the moment are pretty good. The plans, what's coming up, we're planning to do a contest. So on Sunday coming up, the 11th of June, so that'll be the day this goes out, I believe. We will be doing the Practical Wireless 2-meter QRP contest. So we'll be up at Epsom Downs. I think, Martin, you're coming along as well, Martin Butler. I think we're hoping you're bringing the aerial.
I will be there.
And we'll be up there working that contest. So we'll hope to make some contacts and see how we get on.
Yeah, no problems. I'll be there. I'll have the antenna. No problems. Well, you're right. I was on 6 meters. I got told afterwards by 3 or 4 people. They said, "We heard you on 6 meters, Martin. Well, why didn't you come back to me? Why didn't you work me?" sort of thing. But there were quite a few people in the area actually listening and didn't come back, which is a bit of a shame. I started off 6 meters about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, local time. We were pretty much just working UK, out to about 100 miles UK. I was running a halo, 6 meter halo, up at about, I suppose about 25 foot. And it was working quite well, so out to about 100 miles. And then as the afternoon dragged on, eventually there must have been some sporadic E, because we started hearing Spain, and I worked 2 stations in Spain, and then I worked another station down into Italy. So I was quite pleased. I know Italians on HF is quite easy to do, but it was the first time I'd worked Italy on 6. I've worked Hungary a few times, but never worked Spain or Italy. So that was quite nice. Quite pleased with that. We're doing a 2-meter contest on Epsom Downs. I should be there for that one. And the only other thing I've been doing is playing with desoldering tool. I was playing with a more professional desoldering tool that I got hold of the other week. I've been trying to recover components and bits and pieces off of boards, and sometimes with the printed circuit boards, you try to recover components, you can do more damage trying to recover them, and you waste your time. But I was playing with some different types of decast soldering tools, and I'm quite impressed with one of them. But I'll probably tell you more about that another time. So, really, that's kind of what we've all been up to. Apart from club meetings and one thing and another, we've been very, very busy. So, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, cheers, guys. It's been another fun one.
And Mr. Mine Rothwell, M0SGL.
No problem at all. It's always good fun.
Yeah, and we'll wait till Emma's out before we do another roll in your wall. Hi.
I'll tell her that.
Okay, mate. I'll say 73 to you all.
73.
7-3.
Cheers, guys.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with news about a product called a Puanda RF. It's a pocket-sized portable RF analyzing tool operating at sub 1 GHz range. It allows the capture, analysis and retransmission of RF via Android devices or a Linux PC. It removes the standard SGR grind of capturing, modifying, modulating, analysing and replaying by hand, replacing it in a simple but powerful interface. There are loads of features to this piece of software, so best thing to do, guys, if you're interested, is to head along to icqpodcast.com, check out the features, and if it's something of use for you, click on the link and have a go. In the UK, we have distance records being broken. The existing 122 GHz and 241 GHz UK records were both extended to a new distance of 6.8 kilometres with a two-way contact in CW from John Hazel, Golf 8 Alpha Charlie Echoes, home QTH, to Ian Lamb, Golf 8 Kilo Quebec Whiskey / Portable, located at Shauna Wood in Winchester. The contact happened on the 28th of May, so last month, and basically the shorter path of 3.8 kilometres was worked at RST 559 on both bands to confirm the equipment setup. Transmit power levels and details of the antennas used, etc. Can all be found on icqpodcast.com, along with a video showing the contacts being made. So pop out the website and check that out. And while you're at the website, the CubeSat Developers Workshop that was held in San Luis Obispo in California back in April made available all their presentation details available. So loads of YouTube videos and the 2017 presentation slides to check out. So again, lots of content there for you guys to operate using CubeSat. Certainly worthwhile checking out. Well, now we head over to our feature this episode, which is a feature regarding the Yaesu FT-450D review by Martin at M1MRB. So guys, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this feature I wanted to talk about my new HF radio. We've kind of mentioned it a couple of times on the podcast, Chris and myself, as we've been out and about playing and one thing and another. However, I kind of thought it would be worth doing a review, even though this is not a brand new radio on the market. And the reasons why I purchased it may resonate with yourself, because this is actually a very, very good radio. So what did I actually buy? Well, I bought a Yaesu FT-450D. Now, why would I buy one of those, you say? Oh, there's others on the market with fancy displays and this, that and the other. Well, you have to do your homework. You have to do your homework of what you think is the ideal radio for yourself. And that's where looking at spec sheets, looking at radios, looking at YouTube videos, and talking to other amateurs to find out what they think of a radio. And I didn't want a massively big radio. I wanted something that I could take on holiday with me, take out portable, and generally use it as a quick radio to play with in the back garden, or the backyard as our American cousins call. So I did my homework, and quite honestly, the radio ticked 99% of all the boxes I wanted. So I decided to go out and purchase a Yaesu FT-450D. Now, it's a compact little radio. It's 9 inches wide, 3.5 inches high, and 8.5 inches deep. That's without the knobs, according to Yaesu. It weighs 8.5 pounds, so it's not heavy. You can pick it up with one hand. And it has an absolutely monstrous number of features that I wouldn't have expected of a radio of this type. It has DSP, now digital signal processing, and it works very, very well. It has an onboard 400 MHz built-in IF DSP processor, so you can do lots of bits and pieces. We'll come on to that in a minute. It has a built-in electronic keyer. Well, most radios do these days, but it's still nice to have the keyer available, so you don't have to buy a separate one if you buy yourself a paddle. It comes with a massive LCD display. The LCD display on this one is white writing on a black background. Now, that's completely different to the way most radios are, and it's nice and easy to see the display. It gives you lots of information, which I kind of like. And seeing as I only have to wear my glasses for reading, I often forget to put them on. I sit in front of a radio and I get most annoyed because I can't see the display. This is a very clear display and allows me to work without any effort because of the nice big display. I don't need my glasses. The metering is a bar graph meter, so you don't have a analog meter on this radio. You have bar graph. And the bar graph metering is for SWR, power, ALC, and it works very, very well. And I'm very, very impressed. This radio also came with a built-in TCXO. That's a temperature-controlled crystal oscillator. And when it's warmed up, it's supposedly good to 1 part per million per hour. So it drifts very, very, very small amount of drift on it. And a lot of other radios, you had to buy the TCXO as an optional extra, as an aftermarket thought. So this radio has it already fitted. AGC levels, well, we know that pretty much the standard are fast or slow, but this one has an automatic level. So if you leave it to automatic, it tries to work out what's the best setting for you and does that very, very well. Clarifier adjustment, as you'd expect, works very, very well, and I've used that a couple of times. One of the big advantages of this radio, it has a built-in antenna tuning system. Now, with all automatic antenna tuners, they don't tune as wide a range as a manual antenna tuner. But quite honestly, if you've got a near resonant antenna or a mobile whip, this will tune it in very, very quickly, and it works very, very well. Now, the manufacturer says it will tune up to a 3-to-1 mismatch. I would say that I thought it tuned better than that, but the spec is 3-to-1, so worth a look. And moving on the back panels, the back panel's very clean as well. You don't got hundreds of sockets, but what the sockets you do have are very, very useful. You obviously got the antenna socket. You've got a dedicated data jack for FSK or RTTY, and you've also got an RS-232 port to interface your radio with the CAT program, so you can interface the radio with your computer and run rig control programs from that. And that looks very, very interesting. You have configurable function buttons. So most of the functions in this radio are actually on buttons on the front panel. And there are menus, a few menus there, but predominantly everything you want to mainly use are on the front panel. For those extra functions, you might want to do more than a few times, you can program some of the buttons to act as function buttons and change what that function of that button does from within the menu system. So it's a very, very versatile front panel and certainly allows you to operate with ease. One of the other things that Chris and I were absolutely gobsmacked when we got it and started playing with it is it actually has a voice keyer. So the radio has 50 standard memories for holding frequencies in, plus 2 memories to hold voice memories of about 10 seconds each. And you can use these to voice key your radio, so it can act as a voice keyer, keep putting your call sign out in a contest or that sort of thing. Now, often you don't get that until you start paying big bucks with radios, or you have to buy an aftermarket add-on for it. So quite nicely, it does actually come with some really nice functions. It also has a CW beacon function and a 10 kHz roofing filter, which is up at the first IF, so to stop all the noise up there. So all in all, I think it's a brilliant radio. But there's one other feature I like about this, and especially for me. When it starts getting a bit dull and you get a bit older, when the light is a bit dull, it's nice to have illuminated buttons. And this radio has illuminated buttons, so if you're operating somewhere and it's starting to get a bit dull, at least the buttons are alight and you can see what you're doing. So I think that's an absolute brilliant one. So this radio covers HF through 6 meters, so you've got all the HF bands and 6 in all the modes, so upper, lower side bands, CW, FM and data modes. It also has CT CSS tones for 10 meters and 6 meters where you can use FM. Haven't tried FM on below that because that would infringe the band plan, so I haven't done that, but certainly allowing you to do 6 meters with FM with CTSS tones for repeaters is certainly something worth doing. So what are the power requirements for the FT-450D? Well, it suggests in the manual that you run it off 13.8 volts. You probably get away with a few volts less than that, but obviously your power will drop off. They also say that you need an external power supply which is capable of delivering 22 amps. Now that sounds like a lot, but in fairness it's no worse than most rigs running 100 watts and probably better than some. So I wasn't too upset about that. Portable use, I've got a massive leisure battery for QRO operations, so it wasn't going to be a major issue. On receive, she draws about 1.5 amps, so 1.5 amps, certainly more than, say, the old FT-290 of the early 80s. You know, there's 2 meter SSB multi-mode rig that Yaesu had out, but you can't really compare it. It's like comparing eggs with bananas. You know, this is a completely different radio. You can adjust the IF width, and this is quite nice, and it's all built in. For SSB, you can have a 1.8 kHz bandwidth, 2.4 or 3 kHz bandwidth. Now, I kind of like 1.8 on a busy band because it cuts the noise off either side. But you've got filtering for those 3 steps, which is quite nice, and it's built in. For AM, you can do 3 kHz, 6 kHz or 9 kHz, and 9 kHz is the UK standard for AM broadcast. I guess in the States you may find that changes to 10 kHz for the US version, but I'm not 100% sure. For FM, you can have 2.5 or 5 kHz bandwidth of your signal. And for CW, you can actually set the IF width down to 500 Hz. So if you're doing CW, down to 500 Hz is a lot better than the standard SSB width of 2.4. But this one also goes 500 Hz, 1.8 kHz and 2.4 kHz on CW. So what else can you do with it? Well, you could use it with an ATAS antenna, and mobile brackets are available. So it will work with an ATAS antenna, which could be quite useful if you had, say, a motorhome and you wanted to use in a motorhome. This could be a very useful option. The radio also has a graphic equalizer for the microphone, a digital microphone equalizer it's called, and there are 10 steps, 10 options, and you can cycle through, pick the best one for your voice. It will then set your audio up best for you. What else can we do with it? Well, I said on the front panel it had a massive display. It has kind of a block diagram of the radio that shows you what's switched on and what's off. So if the antennas are light, you're connected to the antenna. If the antenna's flashing, then you've got a mismatch and you need to obviously either use the auto ATU or fix the mismatch problem. You can switch your antenna on and off, your IPO on and off. The roofing filter's on all the time. You can then switch your noise blanker on or off. So it's a very, very versatile radio, I must admit, and I've been more than happy with mine. So, looking at this radio, well, I've owned mine about 4 weeks. Every time I've used it, everybody I've heard, I've been able to work. Now, I've not always run 100 watts, but I took this radio straight out of the box, and we ended up at Chris's house when I first got it. We connected it to its antenna. We didn't do any of the fancy setups, and I know we probably should have done, but we started working. People straight away, no problems at all. Last weekend, I was out on 6 meters, worked 10 people on 6 meters in a short period of time in 3 countries. So, it does work very, very well. The other thing is, it's extremely good value for money. This radio costs under £600 in the UK at the moment, and it's a lot of bang for your bucks. It's a really nice radio to use, and I'm quite impressed with it. The other thing, as we start to close out on this, it's great for the beginner. If you're a beginner and you've just passed your test in the UK and you're only allowed to run 10 watts, you can turn this down. The power settings are between 5 and 100 watts. So with this radio, you can set it for 10 watts today if you're a foundation license holder. When you pass your intermediate, you can set it for 50 watts. And when you pass your full license, it'll allow you to run it right up to full power 100 watts with your license there. One last tip on this, and I say, I think it's a really brilliant little radio, and quite honestly, probably missed by a few of us. I didn't instantly think of this one until I did the homework, but everybody I've spoke to who's had one or got one loves it to bits. And one little tip, at the moment I'm working for a parcel shipping company. Please keep the box. The box will protect your radio if you have to ship it somewhere. If you sell it or you ship it back for repair or modification, keep the box. The box it came in is the best box for protecting the radio when it goes through the postal system. And another thing is, when I was working for a dealer, the box certainly added money to your resale value, because the dealer, when he buys it off you, obviously may very well sell it on over the internet. So make sure that you keep the box. I hope this was of interest, and I hope for those of you who got massive rigs, think about it. It's a good second rig, good holiday rig, a good all-rounder, and I'm very pleased with mine. I hope that was of interest.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
As we come to the end of episode 239 of the ICQ podcast, a few housekeeping things to do before we close up shop. I'd like to remind you all about our website, which is www.icqpodcast.com, where you can find all the show notes, other information that didn't make the show, and information about all sorts of things relating to the presenters and ICQ podcast. We also have a Facebook group that seems to be growing almost week on week, so that's quite good. If you wish to join it, just drop Colin an email or put a request in on Facebook, and Colin will allow you in if you wish to join. Colin and I are both available on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm sure most of the other presenters are as well. So if you want to look us up, we're more than willing to take messages from you any which way we can. I'd like to thank the three presenters who joined me this time for the News Roundtable, Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU, Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH, and Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL. And I enjoyed it very much, as I do every News Roundtable we record. It's great fun sitting back with the boys and having a good chat and then recording the podcast. And I think we give you a fair discussion about what we think. If you'd like to get involved, or you can contact us via the website or our email address, which is info@icqpodcast.com. As I say, the website is www.icqpodcast.com. And while you're on the website, why not sign up for Colin's newsletter? He sends one out about once a week, letting people know what he's been up to. Colin sent out a donation request earlier in the week, and so I'd like to thank all those that did come up with a donation for us. We do this for free. We don't take advertising, but we do pay for it out of our own pocket. We don't charge you. We pay for the running costs out of our own pocket. So those donations will be gratefully received, and we thank you very much for them. I'm sure Colin mentioned you all earlier on in the show. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your downloads. I say this every episode, but I really do mean it. Those downloads make it all worthwhile doing. And I know every one of the presenters, he finds it great to talk to you guys when we're at rallies or out and about meeting amateurs. And all those downloads, as I say, are proof that you guys are actually listening. And we will continue to produce this podcast as long as we have a listener base. So thank you very, very much for your downloads. But don't forget, you can always tell a friend. I'm more than happy to have more downloads. So you can always tell a friend, people down the Ham Club or whatever, if they're interested in what we're doing, tell them about us and see if they like it. So if you'd like to get involved, as I said once again, contact us via the website or the email address, which is info@icqpodcast.com, and we look forward to your feedback. Well, all's left for me to do now is make that lovely Mrs. B a cup of tea when she comes in from work shortly. So don't forget, guys, we'll do it all again in a fortnight's time. 73 time, 73 time, 73 time, 73 time, 73 time.